Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the thing everyone told you would save you might actually be slowly suffocating you. From childhood, you were taught a simple formula for life: stay positive, think positive, be positive. Teachers repeated it, self-help books glorified it, motivational speakers shouted it from brightly lit stages. Somewhere along the way, it became more than advice. It became a rule, a quiet commandment for how to exist. No matter what happens, stay positive. Lost your job? Stay positive. Heartbroken? Stay positive. Confused about your life? Stay positive. Pain becomes something to quickly cover up, like a stain on a white shirt. Sadness becomes an inconvenience. Anger becomes something embarrassing you're supposed to hide. And slowly, without even noticing it, you begin to perform happiness. But imagine this. One day, you wake up and something inside you feels wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, just quietly wrong. You smile at the right moments, you say the right optimistic things, you post the right inspirational quotes, you tell people you're doing great, even when you're not entirely sure what that even means anymore. Yet somewhere deep beneath that carefully maintained optimism, there's a strange heaviness, a quiet tension you can't quite explain. Why? If positivity is supposed to make life better, why does it sometimes feel like you're lying to yourself? Why do people who constantly preach positivity often seem exhausted behind closed doors? Why do some of the most relentlessly positive individuals secretly struggle with anxiety, emptiness, or a strange sense that they've lost touch with something real inside themselves? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, what if the constant pressure to stay positive isn't actually helping you, but preventing you from understanding yourself? This idea sounds almost dangerous. After all, positivity has become sacred in modern culture. Questioning it can feel almost rebellious. We are surrounded by messages telling us that happiness is a choice, negativity is weakness, and optimism is the ultimate solution to every problem. But reality is rarely that simple, because there is something strange about the human mind, something paradoxical. The more you try to suppress certain emotions, the stronger they often become. The more you insist that everything is fine, the more something deep inside you starts whispering that it isn't. Think about it. Have you ever tried to force yourself to feel positive when you were deeply upset, only to feel even worse afterward? Have you ever told yourself, I shouldn't feel this way, as if your emotions were mistakes rather than signals? Have you ever smiled in front of others while quietly carrying a storm inside your chest? If so, then you have already felt the beginning of a conflict most people never dare to confront, a silent war between authenticity and optimism. Because somewhere along the way, positivity stopped being a tool and became a mask that hides anger, a mask that hides grief, a mask that hides doubt, fear, loneliness, and the raw complexity of being human. And the strange thing about masks is this: the longer you wear them, the harder it becomes to remember what your real face looks like. But here's where the paradox becomes even more unsettling. What if the emotions you are trying so hard to escape, your sadness, your anger, your confusion, are not the enemy at all? What if they are messages? What if they are signals pointing towards something deeper that your carefully maintained optimism refuses to acknowledge? Because history has shown something fascinating about the human mind. The greatest breakthroughs in self-understanding rarely come from comfort. They come from confrontation, from moments when the illusion cracks, from moments when the smile fades, and you are finally forced to face what has been quietly waiting beneath the surface all along. And perhaps that is the real question hiding beneath this entire conversation. Not whether positivity is good or bad, but something far more unsettling. What if the constant pressure to stay positive is preventing you from becoming truly aware of yourself? What if your relentless optimism is quietly disconnecting you from your deepest truths? And if that's true, then the real danger isn't negativity. The real danger might be the illusion that everything is fine. Because once you begin to see that illusion, you can never quite unsee it. And when that realization begins to settle in, another question emerges, one that reaches far deeper into the psychology of the human mind. Why do we cling so desperately to positivity in the first place? What hidden force inside us, and inside society, pushes us to reject the darker parts of our own nature? That is where the real story begins. The strange thing about the human mind is that it rarely fears pain itself. What it truly fears is facing what pain might reveal. Because pain has a way of exposing things we spend our entire lives trying to avoid. It exposes cracks in the identity we carefully built. It exposes doubts we buried years ago. It exposes uncomfortable truths about our relationships, our ambitions, even the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. And that is precisely where the obsession with constant positivity begins, not as wisdom, but as protection. Somewhere deep inside the psyche, there exists a powerful mechanism designed to defend the ego from discomfort. When something threatens our sense of stability, failure, rejection, loss, the mind quickly begins searching for ways to restore balance. Sometimes that balance comes through reflection and growth, but often it comes through denial. The human mind is remarkably creative when it comes to avoiding painful truths. Instead of confronting the complexity of our emotions, we simplify them, we categorize them, we label certain feelings as bad and others as good, and slowly a dangerous illusion begins to take shape. If happiness is good, then sadness must be wrong. If optimism is strength, then doubt must be weakness. If positivity is success, then negativity must be failure. This belief sounds harmless at first, but once it settles into the culture of a society, it begins quietly reshaping the way people experience their own emotions. Suddenly, anger is not something to understand, it's something to suppress. Grief is not something to process, it's something to move on from. Confusion is not something to explore, it's something to fix as quickly as possible. And so people begin doing something subtle, but deeply damaging. They stop listening to themselves. The famous psychologist Carl Jung once warned about this exact phenomenon. He believed that every human being carries within them a hidden part of the psyche, known as the shadow, the collection of emotions, desires, and traits that we reject because they do not fit the image we want to present to the world. But here is the unsettling truth Jung discovered. The more you reject your shadow, the stronger it becomes. When anger is suppressed, it does not disappear, it transforms into resentment. When sadness is denied, it does not vanish, it turns into numbness. When fear is ignored, it does not dissolve, it quietly controls your decisions from the background. In other words, positivity can become a psychological disguise, a way of avoiding confrontation with the parts of ourselves we do not want to see. But the roots of this problem do not lie only within the individual mind. They are deeply embedded within modern culture itself. Over the past century, society has developed an almost obsessive relationship with happiness. Success is measured not just by wealth or status, but by the appearance of emotional well-being. Social media feeds overflow with smiling faces, inspirational quotes, and carefully curated glimpses of perfect lives. The message becomes clear without anyone explicitly saying it. Your life should look happy. Your emotions should be stable. Your struggles should be temporary, quickly overcome, and neatly packaged into a motivational lesson. But reality rarely works this way. Real life is messy, chaotic, contradictory, and perhaps no philosopher understood this tension better than Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche believed that suffering was not a flaw in existence, it was a fundamental part of growth. He argued that human beings develop strength not by avoiding hardship, but by confronting it directly. Yet modern culture often teaches the opposite lesson. It encourages people to escape discomfort as quickly as possible. Feeling lost? Distract yourself. Feeling sad? Think positive. Feeling angry? Calm down and move on. But when every uncomfortable emotion is immediately neutralized with forced optimism, something profound begins to disappear from human experience. Depth. Because emotions, even painful ones, are signals. They are messages from the unconscious mind pointing towards unresolved tensions in our lives. Sadness may signal loss or unmet needs. Anger may signal violated boundaries. Fear may signal uncertainty about the future. When these signals are ignored in favor of constant positivity, the mind loses one of its most important navigation systems. It becomes like a ship trying to cross an ocean after throwing away its compass. At first, everything seems fine. The waters appear calm, the sky is clear, but slowly, almost invisibly, the ship begins drifting further away from its intended direction. This is the hidden psychological cost of relentless positivity. Not immediate collapse, but gradual disconnection. Disconnection from one's authentic emotions, disconnection from deeper self-understanding, disconnection from the raw, sometimes uncomfortable reality of being human. And the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer offered an even darker insight into this phenomenon. He believed that much of human suffering comes from our endless attempt to escape discomfort rather than understand it. According to Schopenhauer, people often chase happiness as if it were a permanent destination, but happiness, like all emotions, is temporary. Trying to freeze it in place to maintain permanent positivity is like trying to stop the ocean from moving. The more desperately you try to hold on to it, the more unnatural life begins to feel. And perhaps that explains why many people who constantly project positivity secretly feel exhausted, because maintaining the illusion of constant happiness requires enormous psychological energy. You must filter your emotions, edit your reactions, hide your darker thoughts, convince yourself that everything is fine even when something inside you quietly knows it isn't. Eventually, the mind begins to split into two versions of itself: the public self, the smiling, optimistic version presented to the world, and the hidden self,
the part that still feels anger, confusion, sadness, and fear. The problem is that this hidden self does not disappear simply because it is ignored. It waits, and over time its influence begins to surface in ways people rarely recognize, not as obvious emotional breakdowns, but as something far more subtle: a quiet emptiness, a strange sense of disconnection, a feeling that despite all the positivity, something real is missing. And this is where the consequences of forced positivity begin to reveal themselves, because when an entire culture teaches people to distrust their darker emotions, the results reach far beyond the individual mind. They begin reshaping relationships, societies, and the very way people understand what it means to live a meaningful life. And once you start seeing these hidden consequences, they become impossible to ignore. The most dangerous psychological traps are rarely the ones that look dangerous. They're the ones that look comforting. At first glance, constant positivity appears harmless, even admirable. A person who always stays optimistic seems strong, resilient, emotionally mature. Society praises this mindset. Friends admire it. Social media rewards it with likes, encouragement, and approval.